This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
Yes! Playoff tickets! Just need to click here and... Wait, what? Fake site? Good thing McAfee threw the red flag. That would have been $400 gone.
McAfee blocks risky sites so you don't pay for seats and other things that don't exist. Plans start at just $39.99 for your first year. That's cheaper than parking on game day. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
This episode is brought to you by NBA on Prime. The NBA on Prime is back with an exciting week of Emirates NBA Cup action. The knockout rounds begin with quarterfinal doubleheaders on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Then it's a semifinal doubleheader on Saturday. And it all culminates with the championship game next Tuesday night, only on Prime. If you're not a Prime member, sign up for a 30-day free trial to get started today. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Huntworth. For all types of weather, all types of terrain, all types of budgets, it's clothing that just works. Check them out at huntworthgear.com. And right now, even if you missed their Black Friday sale, they still have 25% off the entire site. So check that out over at huntworthgear.com. And like I said, that Berber has been great for me this season, as well as, I mean, if you just want some like stocking stuffers, those fingerless gloves and that Heat Boost Merino beanie, like those things are, I mean, you can't go wrong with those. Just some great options from Huntworth. Like I said, I love the fact that they have just a regular merino beanie right now. Absolutely love that. And then over at Latitude, shipping, if you want it by Christmas, you got to order by the 15th. And what I noticed going through their site, they have a new shirt that dropped. So their merch is really great. But they have a new We Got 'Em shirt. And I think that's pretty slick. May have to pick one of those up because I love the fact that they're reposting all of those when you're tagging them in it and saying we got them. They're showing the love for people that are following along with them. So that's great. Definitely get over there. Check out our friends at Genesis 3D Printing. If you go over to our Instagram or the Rome Hunt Instagram, you'll see on one of the last reels that we put up going through the creek there, you'll see me and with an Insta360 mount that we're working on with Austin for the bow riser to get, when you're walking in or just so that you have it there. Yes, we did fail quite mightily getting a shot on camera, or at least some of that, but it's still working through that, but that is something that he's working on, as well as one of those for the trad bow. So keep checking that out over there and following along with, like I said, the stuff that Austin's doing over there, as well as our friends at Zinger and Kanadi. We're going to have to get those guys on the podcast and talk about like some of their new offerings with like kind of like their budget arrow line and stuff like that. But, really appreciate all the support. And then with the Patrons, like through our Patreon group, we started kind of around the deer camp, keeping track of all the animals that we've harvested through the group and things like that. And, I'm sure we haven't logged all of them, but right now we're up at 80 animals harvested: bucks, does, bears, elk, turkeys. And it's really fun to see all of that. So for the last podcast of the year, I think we're going to have to be able to get that information, put it in sortable context so we can kind of see who's doing it right now. I mean, Nate Roosevelt's killed like 7 deer so far, a bunch of does, and he's just really getting after it. And the Taylor family out in Montana is just, laying waste to mule deer, whitetail deer, elk, everything. So, great job, guys. Appreciate the support. And we'd like to see the buck to doe ratio and kind of that stuff. Cause like I said, that's where this kind of started was talking about like are we doing our part to harvest does? And we get a little bit into that in this podcast about are we here in Michigan doing what we need to be doing for the health of the herd. For that, we talk about hunting podcast and kind of like the ebb and flow of that sort of stuff, and some of like, I don't know, like the tradition here in Michigan and things that we can change and things like that. But just a real fun podcast. Matt's a great dude. He's been, kind of critiquing hunting podcasts for quite some time, especially in the beginning. So he gives like some insight onto the ones that he's still following along with, ones different genres for different guys. So I think that this is going to be a fun. It's a fun listen to, just for guys, especially here in Michigan. But it's just one of those sit back and listen and kind of armchair quarterback the podcast. So you guys are going to have fun with this one. We had a lot of fun recording it, and as always, thanks for listening. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. And today, I believe this may be his podcast debut. Maybe you're following along with him on Instagram at the Hunt Pod Instagram handle, and he'd been doing that for a long time. I think it's kind of hit or miss now, but Matt Michalek, how you doing today, Matt?
Good. I'm doing real good. Just freezing a little bit, wearing my merino in the house because it's been so cold.
Oh my gosh, I woke up this morning and it was freaking -3 here. I don't know what it was like over by you guys, but
yeah, I think it was like high of 9 or something today. It was just brutal. So
yeah, it was wild, but yeah. So Matt is, I would say amongst our group, like affectionately, well, he's a lot of things, but I would say he's the data nerd kind of. So we affectionately call him Matt.com. For all of your deals, all the information, all the things. And so I brought him on here because I wanted to have a discussion kind of like on hunting podcast and kind of like the way that things have gone over the last, like the entire time that we've been doing this podcast. And interestingly enough, like I don't know that we had known each other previously, but we have mutual friends, and we actually hunted in Colorado together since then, like in between. But I think before that, I don't think he knew that we knew the same people when he was doing his podcast reviews and stuff like that. So, for you, Matt, you're a Michigan hunter, like predominantly. What had your hunting background been growing up?
My hunting background started mainly like as a teenager, I guess, and then it kind of took a gap there, like right after I started going to college, and then I got more serious into it afterwards. But I was the only boy left in the classroom basically when gun season kicked off, because all the other kids were out with their dads, and it was like me and the girls left in the classroom, so it was like, okay, I'm hearing the stories. My buddies are bringing their rack in, walking through the classroom and stuff, and we were from a pretty rural place, like where if anybody from Michigan knows, like where the Wolverine was found in the state, that was our science teacher that was like tracking it and had it on his cell cams and stuff. And so that's kind of like the people I was around, and like the guys that are kind of teaching you. And yeah, so then it just from family, friends, talking it up and all that, they kind of got me into it. So as the like youth hunter, I had a garage sale bow, got out there and tried hunting, and then never shot anything until I was in college and came home. And at that point, I'd upgraded to a bow from eBay. My buddy put strings on it. I picked it up, went to our backyard, shot a doe over a carrot pile at 5 yards, just standing there in the trees. And that was kind of like, from there, it's kind of been like slowly going up. But basically, just kind of self-taught and asking people how they do things and all that and taking pointers. And that's kind of how I got into more like listening to podcasts and all that, just picking up any little tip you could to be better.
Yeah, so that's kind of tracking. And it's funny that you say that about the eBay bow, because I've had a couple of eBay bows, and I literally just bought a bow off of eBay last night, so that should be arriving like in the next like 10 days. But I literally bought a bow off eBay last night. So
yep, my current bow is an eBay bow. So
and for anybody who's listening and who's following along, maybe you will hear like a proverbial gasp, because like I've had this bow that I'm shooting right now, and for like any old heads or anything like that, like having a bow for like, I think I've shot this bow for 7 years. Shooting the same bow for 7 years in today's day and age is like blasphemy. It's like you have to have a new bow every year. You have to be upgrading. You have to be doing all these things. But for me to be moving on to a different bow is really something. But I've just beat the tar out of this bow. Every bolt has either been replaced or it's rusted, and the limbs have some definite deficiencies and stuff.
Didn't you switch for your bear hunt because your main bow was like cracking limbs and stuff? And
yeah, yeah. The lower limb has some definite like cracks in it. John said, "Oh, that's no problem," and then so I switched, and I'd never, I've got other bows, but that bow's just like the one.
Yeah,
and that's why I switched back to it, because I shot that bear with it. I'd never killed anything with that bear archery bow that I had for a couple of years, and I shot it just fine, and I had it set up to shoot the same arrows, to shoot everything, and then I missed that buck 3 times out of this out of the same stand in one evening.
How close to the Patreon hunt was that? Because I think my luck rubbed off on a few people there.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't that far.
That was before your Kansas trip, right? So that was
yeah. And it wasn't that far, but then it was like going into Kansas, like I could not shoot. I didn't feel comfortable with that bow, and I don't think going into Kansas I would have brought that bow anyways, because, Nate shot that bow. He missed a deer at like 40 with it. And he's like, this bow is just so slow. And then I missed that one a couple times, few times, I guess. You can't say a couple, you have to say a few. And then just going out to Kansas and not knowing like the distances that I'd be shooting or anything like that. And then getting back to shooting that other bow. I mean, took it to the UP, laced a doe, got my mojo back,
yep.
And then went to Kansas, and even Jake's telling me it's like that bow I've shot 7 tacks. I mean, I've shot how many 100+ yard shots with that bow, and like it even like without thinking about it, just dial it and shoot it. So just being like that comfortable. So for me to just be purchasing a new bow is and it's a different bow. It's not even the same, because
that's what I was wondering. If I've shot it off eBay, it's probably the same model, same year, same color.
No, and that's funny because I've shot that. I shot that Carbon Deploy previous to that, and I had a backup bow which was a Carbon Knight, and then that one is a Carbon Zion. So the last like 3 real bows that I've had have been all that same platform. So this is just a humongous deviation from that, so it's gonna be different.
That's where everybody screws up your first year of like the draw cycle you're just used to from the same company for however long, and then you switch, and it takes a while to get that mojo back, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm doing that now, but so that kind of like makes a little bit of sense of like how you got into the podcast stuff, because I guess I would have just thought like where you grew up, like hunting would be a thing, and it sounds like it just wasn't in your family.
Yeah, just not my family. My family's all farmers, and I don't know how many like farmers but most of them are working day in and day out. They're milking cows in the morning and at night, so like trying to get out and hunt just doesn't happen. So, and like a few of my buddies that are farmers that get out, like opening day, maybe the next day is kind of like the 2 days a year that they know nobody's going to call them with issues or like to come fix something or do what, like have to be running. And even this year, like a lot of my buddies were like 9 a.m. They're getting antsy. They're going to start plowing fields and stuff before it gets too cold, because they got harvest off in time to start turning dirt, so it's ready for the spring. And so it's just kind of that's how my family was they were more tied into the farming side of it, and they didn't really care for the hunting because we always had to buy. So my dad was a large animal vet, and we did a lot of 4-H stuff, raising animals and stuff. So the veterinary clinic would buy back in, like all the 4-H animals. So we would buy a beef, a hog, a lamb, like every year, had a huge freezer, always full of meat. So like you didn't have to hunt. My dad didn't grow up hunting. So like, he was like, why would I go sit out there? He was more of a like constantly working on something, but just working all the time. So why would I stop doing that to go sit still somewhere? Just wasn't his jam. So I kind of just got into it from our family friends. But
Yeah, so that was what I was going to say. So then what was the drive to like get into it like at that age or even like after college or whatever?
At that point, it was more like the stories that you hear from your buddies and like seeing, like they bring in the racks into school and stuff. Like at this point, like our teachers would have new guns they would show off. Like we had like that one teacher tracking the Wolverine. Our chemistry class was like the precision versus accuracy. He like we had like 20 to 30 kids in a classroom, small school, but he split the class in half and shot his bow target like across, the room in between all the kids. Like this is the kind of school we went to, and just kind of being around people like that, you're like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm gonna, you just kind of like hear them talking about stuff, and it gets you excited to like try it. So then, I don't know, it was like instead of being the only kid sitting here in class, like I'm gonna go and try it out. So started getting into it, and then yeah, I don't know, after college or in college, I hunted like a little bit, just like gun opener weekend. I'd come home and hanging out with my cousin and stuff. He was kind of showing me the ropes a little bit, and it was just a fun time to be home because all your old high school buddies are back. You're drinking beers at the bar. At that time it was like opening night or the night before opener. People still like partied and all got together and celebrated. And now everyone takes it like so serious and like they're all going to bed by 9, so they're up in the morning, and it's kind of like a different vibe these days when you go home. But back then it was like the big, like all those guys that were farmers were like, I don't have to wake up in the morning, and usually they're the ones that are like unlocking the restaurant in town to start the coffee, at 4 a.m. because that's just the kind of place it was. But I don't know, it was just a lot of fun just to be involved. So.
And then, yeah, I was just going to say, so then like keeping that going, is it just been like that same group of friends or like, I mean, because now you're roped in with us somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, getting roped in with you guys was from those common friends, booked that there's an opening for that elk hunt, and they're like, you want in? And I was like, yep. I didn't even take 24 hours. I was like that, seeing the antlers at their place and stuff is like, I'd like to do that someday. So, said yes. And then I don't know, it was a little while in after saying yes to that they were like, hey, you're doing these podcast reviews and all that. Our buddy that's going with us has a podcast. You should check it out. And I think the first one of yours I listened to was with the urban archery guy out in New York or DC. And that just blew my mind of like, because most of these podcasts you're listening to for whitetail deer hunting, at least, if a guy has a successful year, he's shooting like one buck. And it's like all this buildup for a whole year for one deer. And that guy was shooting like 4 deer a night, 200 nights a year. Like it was just insane to listen to him be like, well, I use, I was like, if you want to poke somebody's brain about like shot placement or gear or whatever, for like hang and bang different place, even though it's suburban, it's like, here's how I climb a tree efficiently and here's my arrow setup and all that. It's like this guy is putting down some serious numbers. So he's kind of the guy to, that was a really eye-opening podcast to kind of dive into and listen to you guys. So,
well, and that was one of the things, like when I first met Taylor and Billy, they were talking about, using rages and stuff like that. And they were just like, they're like, we need these deer to die in,
yeah,
40 yards, otherwise they're in somebody's pool or they're, over a swing set or something like that. So we got to go knock on doors and, we got to pack water so we can clean off all this children's equipment and stuff with blood, so they're doing things that can be like as efficient as possible. And one of the eye-opening things that, just like you said, like, the build up for this one deer, like you talk about like, oh, numbers, blah, blah, blah. We did that podcast with Warren Womack, which still, that guy is something that like I'll always go back to. And, it's just that, he has like the perfect like combination of like the storytelling. He's got like the record keeping, to like he's got the receipts, to say like I scratched it in the cap of my truck every night that I spent in there or whatever. But when he says like he killed like 900 deer or whatever that was, whatever that number was, you talk to Taylor and Billy and they're like,
yeah,
yes.
That's
solid, like you're just like, what? Excuse me? Like, this guy's been doing it for 70 years or whatever. And, that's a ton. So yeah. But when you started doing like the podcast reviews, like, I guess, so for us, obviously it was like, Joe Rogan, like, you first hear about a podcast or like whatever. Yeah. So for you getting into podcasts, how did that come about?
So I'm a engineer at work. So I sit at a desk, like 9 hours a day. And so I've got headphones on a lot of time listening to stuff. And yeah, I started out, so I was a big Joe Rogan fan since like the beginning of Joe Rogan, just from all the Spike TV, UFC, all that stuff, like was getting into all that. And it was like, he launched a podcast, we started listening. But then from that, it was like Tim Ferriss and all these business guys kind of started. And those were like really the only thing, like you listened to at the time, because there wasn't hunting podcasts yet. This is like 2012, like in that area. And then Wired to Hunt popped up, and like that was a whitetail one. And he was like, I got inspired by, like list those business guys. Gertie Bowman was a good one at the time. I want to say like maybe Truth from the Stand was the other whitetail one. Like there's a couple whitetail ones, but not very many. And then all of a sudden, like after, I think it was like when Steven Ranella was on Joe Rogan and was like, dude, you have a really interesting life, you should start a podcast. And like around the time they started is when everyone also must have heard the same thing and said, I'm going to start a podcast too, and it just like took off. But I mean, I like listening to, just like with anything else, like if you only listen to Fox News, you're only going to have that one perspective. So you kind of need to listen to both sides of the story to kind of make up, your own mind and decision on really anything in life. And so I like to listen to all the different podcasts, Eastern style, like the Western style hunting and stuff like that. Like what can I use here, that they use out West that could help me out and stuff like that. So I just was listening to all of them anyways, because I'm plugging away at work. And I was like, I'm going to start reviewing best podcasts to listen to. I started doing a couple different trophies for a while there. I was like, best podcast to listen to, the best guest of the year, the hottest topic of the year. Because it seems like everybody kind of rotated. It's like, you're talking about the Joe Rogans and stuff. When somebody's coming out with a book, all of a sudden they're on every single podcast. It's like the same guest. And that kind of happens with hunting podcasts too. Like the Ranch Fairy hit it big. And all of a sudden, like, everybody had the ranch fairy on. And it was like the hot topic that year that everybody talked about, like heavy arrows, FOC just kind of like took off. And there wasn't too many holdouts that were like, I don't care what the podcasts are saying, I'm still doing my thing. You know, there's only a few guys that were like John Dudley was like, I don't care what the trends are, this is what I'm doing, you know. But yeah, I was just trying to do something different, and kind of just started posting these awards from me, and people liked it, I guess. It kind of took off for a little bit, but I got busy with life, with kids, two little runts running around right now, and uh, I just kind of like stopped listening to as many because of the, you know, the same ideas and same guests were showing up. So it was kind of like, I'm gonna narrow this down to finish, or like only listen to guys that hunt, kind of like my area, the style I want to hunt, or I'm interested in learning about, or like if I just enjoy their personalities, you know, like, so instead of trying to listen to all of them, because there's a new hunting podcast every week for a while there, you know, like somebody'd send me something or tag me in it, and I was like, I just can't listen to all these. So I started narrowing down to just like, okay, like you, I've ran into, went hunting with, like, got to know, like, okay, I'm gonna tune in and see what they got going on, you know. And then a couple other Michigan guys that it's like they have slightly different styles, but they're hunting our state, you know, kind of different areas to go to. You can kind of learn from, see what they're doing, what time of year. It's helpful. So I tune into those.
So, like, one thing that I have found, and I'm going to ask you because I feel like you, I feel like you fall into this a bit, and I think that you're like somewhat the target, because you're like
Marketed
adult
too.
on what's that?
I'm marketed too.
Yeah, like, so you're like the target, right? So you're
Yeah.
listening to like learn, and you know there are so many guys, and I'm not saying that this is you particularly, but I just kind of like want your take on it because you're listening to all these, and you're like inundated, and that's what I say often is like it's really hard, you know, to go somewhere else and talk to someone who just hunts in a box blind or just hunts that has no idea of like the information that we are immersed in every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like where you do hear about like this gear, or you hear about this style, or you hear about this, and you hear about it so much that you're familiar with the terms, and you know like all of the like buzzwords because you've listened to it so much. But then like when it's time to go put it into practice, or you're around people that actually do it, it's like you get these guys that are like a deer in headlights, you know, or like you get guys that are like afraid to go try it on their own because I mean, a lot of this stuff, like if you want to go hunt like Dan Infalt, like it's super intimidating. Like it sucks. Like,
Yeah.
and so like,
Well,
from your perspective, like, you know, being like a new hunter, like you haven't really mentioned anything like about public land. Like you know, you come up with us, and I think that that's maybe some of like a lot of exposure to public land, like big woods type stuff.
mm-hmm.
And so like that, I guess, premise, you know, like you hear all this stuff, and then like trying to like implement it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big change. Especially from like, yeah, like if you're gonna just find somebody who hunts Michigan, typically it is gonna be like that box blind experience. Like, I mean, I just shot a buck out of a box blind yesterday, and I mean, it was the first time I ever sat in that box blind, but it was private land box blind. But it was most of the like guys I know growing up, like their situation is family property that they've owned for generations, and it's a lot of it's over corners of Ags fields, you know. And so there's always deer there, and it's just like waiting for a big deer to show up, and it's the same box blind and grind it out. And so it's a different style than like what you guys talk about here. Um, and I like to learn. uh, I am marketed to pretty well, but I like to learn new things. And I like to try new things, and kind of like the little bit of the engineers. Like I get sucked into all the products, kind of, and trying them out. Um, but yeah, the doing the public land and in-fault style, I started doing that, and that was when I was starting to listen to you guys. And kind of like how I bought our house was I want to be close to state land because of this, because I can't own enough land to just hunt my own place like that. So we started kind of hunting public land around here, and then hunting a public land up there during deer camp. But now it's more of like, um, I hunt my in-laws, which is private, because it's really easy. Like with the kids and daycare, it's or like watching them on the weekends. Like it's a lot easier to be like, hey, you guys stay at the house with grandma and grandpa, and I'm gonna go out back and then be right there. In the morning, at night, during the day. Be around the kids. Versus when I try to hunt public, it's like you're gonna be gone, and just good luck to your wife. So I've been doing a lot more private the last couple of years, especially this year. I did a lease for the first time, and that's been interesting because it was like I don't know, it's about 70 acres, but it's a brand new piece, and it's almost like if you were to hunt a piece of public that only you and two other buddies hunted, and you talked and helped each other figure it out over the course of the year. We were all hunting with our saddles and just like moving around or hunting from the ground, or doing different things every time you were there, basically, but just trying to figure out a property, and you're like hunting it like it was a public land piece that you'd never been to, basically, and just figured it out as the year went on. And that was a lot of fun to be able to take like that stuff you learned from doing the public up north with you guys, or just around here, and like applying it to a piece that I would say it's not pressured, but there's right next door is 5 guys from Ohio leased the property next door. The other property is like a church property that it's just open to all the church members, apparently. So every 50 yards there's a box blind. So it was pretty pressured on each side of it. So you can't get away from that in Michigan. But
So back to the like podcasting, you're listening to them for like information, right? And I think
Yep.
that's where this one kind of stemmed from, is like, I always joke around about it, but it's like there was nobody that was talking about not killing stuff, right? Like it was everybody was like, "Oh, we're just killing all these big bucks," and nobody was talking about, like the experience and like, having a hard time and like trying to learn. But then I feel like, there's a balance, because there's one like that comes to mind that like for me is just like pure entertainment. Like I'm not trying to learn anything
Yep.
from, I'm just listening to the story,
it's a good mix. I mean, but like Deer Hunter podcast, a lot of the time I'm listening to that. It comes out like on Fridays or whatever. And that's a good just Friday. It's just like the boys hanging, listen, like just kind of cooler talk type of thing, Now they're getting a little more amped up with I can't think of the guy's name right now, but the
boogeyman.
The boogeyman, yeah. He's a little intense. He comes in there, gets you amped up for the weekend, But yeah, that one's more of like, it's just the boys hanging kind of thing. Like Working Class Bowhunter has built a huge following from being that style of like, it's just the boys hanging at camp, and just cracking jokes, like bringing in the guys with the inside jokes and all that, and kind of like building their community that way. And those are fun to listen to if that's what you like. So it's just like a lot of guys listen to ESPN Sports Talk Radio, and it's just guys talking, like about the Lions and something. So my thing about that is like you're talking about a sports game you like can't control or do anything with. Like I'm not playing football anymore, but I am actively participating hunting. So like I'd rather listen to that and pick up on a few things of what's going on in the world. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody likes a good hunting story and that's the thing. Like that one that I'm talking about, like pure entertainment. Like I don't know if you've listened to it at all, but I had him on the podcast, and that Earn Your Hunt podcast with Jake Downs
yeah.
is the most vulgar, like wild construction talk podcast that you've ever heard. It's just one guy ranting and rambling.
Yep.
But it's freaking amazing to me.
And yeah,
You know?
and when he's one of those guys, it's like if a lot of people wouldn't enjoy his podcast because it's just him like pissed off in his truck ranting, and it's comical. I mean, because it's like, yeah, these are the thoughts I'm having in my head. He's just saying them out loud and recording them, and just cursing up and down. But he's also one of those guys that just like, he's like, hey, I don't take stuff for free. This stuff is worth the money. This stuff isn't. Like, he's the guy I would listen to on, like Gear Advice or whatever, because he's hunted all over the place, chasing the
29, yeah.
Yeah. So.
But like just like his travel, but like I've talked to him like offline, and when I talk to him about like some of that stuff, he's like, he listens to a lot of like Bill Burr. I guess Bill Burr has like a monologue podcast.
Yeah, Monday.
And like when you like knowing that, you can hear it in his delivery, how he like does the voice inflection and like the character type stuff that he does.
Now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you like that style, like Earn Your Hunt with Jake Downs, and anytime there's anything in the title about travel, oh my God, you need to listen to it, because it's like the most ranty oh my God, it's so funny.
On, I think right before his muskox hunt, and then listening to his rant about the travel, about the muskox trip, was just insane. Their flights in and out from up in the Arctic Circle is just insane. Like I don't know.
And it seems like the worst, like even like the opposite of like island time, like of like it's like oh, there's no planes today, like maybe try again tomorrow. Like I need my bow. Like well, sorry.
Yep. And then like he's like, I'm supposed to leave like tomorrow, and it finally showed up or something. And then it was like trying to leave. It was like, hey, there's no wind. Like let's go. Like, well, there might be fog. Like.
Yeah. Like so. For people listening to the podcast and like you want something that's like definitely don't have your kids in the car, like definitely don't be at church or anything like that. Like
he's the R-rated version of Jason Samkoviak.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Like he's that. Yeah, Jason Samkoviak is like a good like. I like listening to him a little bit, but he's that same style. It's like him in his truck, just driving, talking. He doesn't do the podcasts much anymore. It's all like YouTube stuff, but. He's a little more clean cut.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to like ask you about, like, and that's kind of like where this stemmed from, is like the like ebb and flow of podcasts. Like, so you bring up Jason Samkoviak, so he just changed everything, and that's no secret. He was doing a lot of stuff on YouTube, and he had multiple YouTube channels, and then he just kind of like put most of his stuff behind a Patreon paywall on YouTube, and then just like to bolster the YouTube stuff. And I'm sure that it's doing very well, because he was doing very well on YouTube even before that. And so the Southern Ground podcast and Chasing Tales, they collaborated into the Southern Collective, and then just today they put out their final episode, and they're no longer doing podcasts.
Oh, right.
But they're basically putting out a giant like Discord to create a digital deer camp that's going to be just like a community to kind of like share deer hunting tips and tricks and all that sort of thing, and just to build a community that way. And in the time that like we've been doing this podcast, the amount of hunting podcasts and even bow hunting podcasts specifically that have like came and went is insurmountable. So like what have you seen in the other hunting genres? Because you pay attention to a lot more of like the Western hunting, the rifle hunting, like just overall hunting in general. Like, is that pretty on par?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of them, if they're doing it, as a lot of people are doing it for the wrong reasons, I guess. A lot of people would say, like if you're doing it because you want to try and make money off of it and that's like your only goal, then it ends up they burn out on it because they realize like this is not worth my time for what I get back. The first, it takes a long time, I guess, to build enough brand leeway to make it worthwhile and be able to be like, okay, at this point, like this is going to be my full-time job. And there's only a few guys really who have broke into that, it seems like, to be like this is my gig. Like East Meets West, like he finally did it a year or two ago, and like Working Class Bowhunter and stuff like that, like they've got enough brands behind them finally that they could like make that their gig, and they're focusing more on kind of like you said, they're transitioning into a lot of the videos and YouTube stuff versus just the podcasts. And I think you're seeing a lot of that where it goes from like right now it's audio only is kind of like dying off. A lot of it's going to the video, and especially with like being tied into like Spotify and stuff, you can stream through that too. And then a lot of people are trying to either launch an actual like product to their, after they've built a little bit of a following community, like try and build a product to sell, because then you can get like money directly to yourself, like t-shirts and hats. No offense to anybody that sells t-shirts and hats, but I have so many t-shirts and hats that like I'm just not going to buy anymore. Like you get them free when you get your, maybe not your eBay bow, but you end up picking up free hats and t-shirts all over the place. So like you can't just build your business off of that. But a lot of people are trying to like launch a product, whether it's hopefully something unique, and like solves a problem or whatever. But they tend to be going that way. One of the ones that's really good about that, I would say, Shoot to Hunt, which is a Western rifle hunting one. It's one of the ones it was one of my top on Spotify this year or whatever. So the two guys that do that, one of them is a co-owner with Robbie Denning of Rockslide, which is like the big Western hunting and long range shooting forum. And then the other guy is the owner of Unknown Munitions, which is like a reloading and long range shooting company. And together with products and website building and all that, like these guys are pretty business oriented guys, and they've started launching all these products. Like they have their own rifle pack with EXO hunting company that's like a collaboration, and then shooting bags that are like specifically made, and they have like a shooting class that's like a week-long thing where like, I know you were in the Marines, you talk about how easy it is to shoot 500 yards or whatever, but they shoot.
I missed the damn buck 3 times, yeah. Matt.
they talk about, I think it's like 1,000 rounds you shoot in 5 days of their class. Like, so they're like, it's not like, hey, show up and it's a deer camp type of atmosphere. It's like, hey, it's like a full-on range session every single day kind of thing. It's out in like Idaho. Otherwise, I'd be thinking about that. But just travel to and from is kind of crazy. But yeah, they're pretty good about like tying business and real usable products into it. And that seems to be kind of where people are going. And then, yeah, like, I mean, you guys are doing collaboration. That seems to be a big trend right now, I guess, with like Deer Hunter Podcast, Whitetail Experience doing it, the Rome Crew, you guys are all Michigan Wild Pod, everybody's chipping in. because it's a lot of work. Like I don't do video editing, all that. But yeah, if you could each film your hunt and you have, like not one guy being responsible for every week release, but like you each do, a different video and chip in, that helps spread it. So then you can actually be kind of like family men too, have a little bit of downtime.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that you say there is like, what we're doing, and it's like to be a one-man show, like to try to, like, say, quit your job and go full time, like that would be like the worst thing ever for me.
Yeah,
because then it would become no fun. Like, then it would be like you would have to leverage like every single one of your friends or like your business contacts. And like I've heard, I forget the name. What's the solo hunter guy's name? Tim.
Tim. It wasn't Burnett, was it?
Yeah, Tim Burnett. So I heard him somewhere. I don't know if it was on one of the solo hunter things, like when he was talking about like doing that or whatever, but he was like doing an interview and he was talking about like how like stressful that was, or like being in a position where like, if he lost Prime or if he lost one of these things, like then that he couldn't eat, or he could, so like you get put in a position where like you have to take like a bad product or like whatever so that you can, do these things that you need to do. And like, all of your whole livelihood is based on like your hunting decisions. And I think that that's where like a lot of this ethical stuff comes in, like where you see these guys like poaching stuff and, bending the rules and doing all this stuff, is like because they feel like they have to. And it's like, I remember being on a podcast like long ago with Walt, and he was like, now that you're this big time podcaster, like all tongue in cheek, but he's like, do you feel any pressure that you have to like kill any more animals or like do anything? And I'm like, dude, like that's the whole reason that like everything that I start off with is saying that I'm the world's worst bow hunter, because like if you're gonna freaking sign on with me, like there is no, there's no ambiguity of like what you're getting. You know what I mean?
Set the expectations low.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I'll overachieve.
There's a lot of talk, at least, of some of these guys who like are putting down these huge bucks and like what's going in behind the scenes, and even like on some of the podcasts, they'll be talking about like, oh, we need to ban baiting, but at the same time, those guys are talking about how much they order like 10,000 pounds of corn for themselves, even though they're talking about banning baiting on their podcasts. And then they talk about how much corn they bought, and it's like, okay. And then they have a drone guy on, and they're selling their thermal drone like in their Instagram story. And they're like, 15 grand, who wants to buy our thermal drone? You're like, why did they have that? Like, what are they doing with it? And then they're talking about like they show up to one of their farms in one state, have the drone fly for inventory or whatever, not technically scouting. It's like just for inventory. And then they may or may not go to a farm in another state because they've got to put their pictures of antlers up for, for their brand to keep it going or whatever. Like, I don't know. Yeah, that's become a big thing that I'm kind of against. It's like, I know it's fun to travel to hunt, but being like, oh, I have to put down $7 this year in 5 states, like that became a thing. It seems like, to be like, you're such a great hunter that you've killed them all these different states, but then what's going on behind the scenes to make that happen is like, are you really being like a good, legal, ethical hunter when you do this or not? There's.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing, is like I said, like for me, like I said, trying to be, as above board as possible, as I possibly can be, and to go like, when I go to the UP, it's not like I shot that doe last year, and I put the video up, and I was like, hey, I did the old UP trick and threw some apples out because I can. Like, it's it's not like, but that's the thing. Like, would I be fine with banning baiting? Absolutely. Do I bait down in the Lower Peninsula? Absolutely not. Like,
Yeah.
but it's, it's just one of those things. But am I buying 1,000 pounds of corn for up there? No.
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
I don't know. But I'm being like transparent about it. Like, it's not, I'm not trying to hide anything.
Yeah. And that's what, I mean, maybe they don't care. They're not trying to hide it because they talked about how much they bought, but it was like, you shouldn't be slamming other guys for using it, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's, one of the things we can get back on the podcast thing here in a minute, but like one of the things we were texting back and forth today about was like the harvest numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was you that sent me, because it was like Michigan's harvest numbers this year were down, the hunter numbers were down, and I was reading a little bit on like some of the forums and stuff about that, and wherever this information comes from, I don't doubt that those numbers are correct, that they are down. But somebody on there made like a really good point that was like the numbers have been down, quote unquote, all of a sudden since they started mandatory reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So is that people aren't reporting and that's why it's down? Or was there super scientific way of counting over the overpasses and sending out flyers a better way to do it?
Yeah, I think their reporting before was way off because even at the end of this with the mandatory reporting, you'll see like this big jump in numbers all of a sudden where they put in their like when they have their final report to the NRC, it's like, well, we added this percentage because of like we know within a probability that of like 95% of people are going to report. So we're going to add and inflate this by 5% or whatever. So even then it's not like an actual, like a hard order. These are just the mandatory numbers. Like they know the percentage or probability, or they think they do. But without that mandatory reporting, it was just a wild guess. I mean, I could go out and probably have shot as many bucks as I wanted. And if I was cutting them up myself, like who was going to know? It's kind of like a weird thing. Like with this, at least, like yesterday, you get on the app, I had to report it. And then like that tag's dead. It's been used, So hopefully that, I don't know, keeps our numbers somewhat in line, or at least it's going to set a new standard to like compare against, so that for the future we have a more accurate than what their old system was baseline.
And I think that the argument there, right, is like, well, people aren't going to check in and, people can still do that and all that stuff. But I think the way that it was being calculated before, it didn't take into account all of the honest people. It was just a thumb in the air guess. This way, at least you're getting all of the honest feedback.
Yeah.
So everybody who is following the rules, you're getting that information where you weren't before. You were still just getting a guess, or whoever filled out the paperwork. Because before, there could have been like myself or whomever else got a survey, didn't fill it out, didn't send it back, but they did legally harvest, tag, and just not fill out the flyer or not go to a deer check-in station because it wasn't required. Mm-hmm. But that didn't mean that they didn't harvest a deer legally.
Yeah, that's what I don't know. We can only do as much as like the information we're given, and I think this is a better way to get it, to say like, hey, this is mandatory, and you can either, I know there's issues with like people don't know how to use a smartphone, or they don't have internet in the UP or whatever. Like, okay, they opened it up a little bit better this year of like, then here's a call-in number, like for when you get to a place you have self-service, if you don't know how to use an app, like there's a couple different ways to be like, please just report it. because otherwise, they have no idea. I know people argue online of like, well, this is all stupid. They opened up 10 doe tags across the entire Lower Peninsula. They need to do it county by county. Well, that's what they were doing. And like the county I grew up in, it was unlimited doe tags. I think they were $5 a tag. You could buy 4 per day till they were gone. And no one, me and my cousin, would buy doe tags because that's all we shot were does, it seemed like. And, be like, hey, you still got a couple? Because got that Saiga 12 gauge, and there may be more than my 4 for today laying here, like I'm going to need some help gutting type of thing. But nobody used them. And so that's why they just started to like open it up. Like, okay, like we got an issue. Just so everybody knows, we're going to try and make it easier, and it's 10 per person. Like across the whole Lower Peninsula, it seems we have a problem. But they don't.
And so what was the thing that you had sent me from Ohio? Because you were kind of comparing Michigan and Ohio in the numbers there.
The buck to doe ratio is wild on that. But one of the things people complain about in Michigan right now, especially, is that the firearm season's too long. And the reason they're doing that is, they're trying to get more tags filled. So they're trying to just be like, here's every opportunity possible. We made it no longer an actual muzzleloader season. It's basically a second firearm season. And now you've got 4 weeks to fill those tags. Please go and fill them. But a lot of people are like, well, the opposite needs to happen to create a sense of urgency. So you don't just pass deer. Like, I'm guilty of it. I pulled an SD card cam because we had a new neighbor at my in-laws, like cutting limbs with a shooting line directly to our place. Pulled the SD card at the house, and I was looking through photos and went, oh, there's some big bucks walking around out here. I need to hunt down there by the swamp, and had 7 does in front of me, waited till a buck popped out, and I never got a shot at him, but it was like, I could have shot, a couple does probably. But I didn't have that sense of urgency because I had, after that, I was going to have 3 more weeks of gun season. So, Ohio has that where it's like a 1 week only. And so in that 1 week, they put down 85,000 deer, it was reported, which is a really good number for, 1 week harvest. But one of the big things is that we have the biggest issue in Michigan, and people talk about it forever, is the buck to doe ratio. So they shot 67% does in that week. Michigan, the 2-week gun season, we shot 63% bucks. So we shot 120, or it was like 131,000 deer in 2 weeks, which is a big chunk of the harvest, I guess, for the year total. But 63% of that was bucks. And so everybody's doing, probably what I was doing that week, of saying like, I got enough time. I'm just going to be buck hunting. So, I'm guilty of it too, but I also did shoot a doe during gun season. So I tried to do my part a little bit, but yeah, it's something that needs to be changed when there's overpopulation, all that. We need to be the conservationists everybody talks about. Oh, I'm a conservationist. Like that's a big marketing term everybody uses. Like, look at all the conservation we do as hunters, but nobody actually looks at the health of the herd. They look at the inches of the antler, and I think that needs to be pushed a little bit more. Of Nate Roosevelt out there slaying does, Brad shooting everything that walks near him.
Yeah. So what do you think? Obviously, I guess you've been around farming enough and cattle and all that stuff, but like, what do you think is if you were, in charge of the harvest or the herd, And you got to listen to the people and all that. Like, what do you think is the answer? Like, where do you think you start, and where do you think you got to end up?
I think somehow the problem I see, like from growing up in that area, there's a lot of farms that are, like it'll be one family owns 2,000 acres, let's say, okay? And they have like 5 family members that hunt. So on the flip side, I live next to Sleepy Hollow State Park, and I don't know if that's even 2,000 acres, and half of it's like a lake in the middle of it. Um, the amount of guys that hunt that is like in the thousands probably, compared to the 5 guys that hunt that farmland, and then they're putting in for their insurance company for crop damage permits or crop damage, all that to get money back. So somehow we need to have those insurance companies, if it's really an issue, if it really is actually overpopulated like they say, and we can't hold that many deer on the land, then they need to incentivize it. Either the insurance company pays somehow the state or something to open up the access, or somehow it gets like incentivized back to the farmers to be like, yes, it's worth it to allow people onto my land to like shoot some of these deer. And I know like they've loosened the rules on the crop depredation permits or whatever. Like you can a lot easier put down like who the different hunters are to use the tags and stuff. But it's still not like open during season, like, so I don't know that people get very fired up about it, because people don't like to, like a lot of my neighbor here, like a lot of people I know, they only like to really chase bucks, like, and during that season is like when they're going to allocate their time, because like summer is family time and all that. So somehow they need to open up those areas where like they're not overcrowded with hunters. Like if you space people out more, because that's a big thing, is like access to land. So if you could open up a lot of these farms access to people to hunt, I think that would be a lot better to get those herds down. And then you wouldn't have, those insurance companies shouldn't be complaining, because all those deer are no longer just herded up in those private fields. I don't know. I don't know how that would work out in the end, but if there's a way for them to pay for CRP to be, like, don't plant crops in this, leave it as CRP for the wildlife, we should be able to be like, okay, how much money does it take to allow some people to hunt this section too?
But I mean, as the overall, so that's your area specifically, but that doesn't help the people in the UP. That doesn't help, northern Michigan, as far as like, one buck APR, the doe permit thing, like, because any changes that are made are going to be like across the board, right? So like that's the thing. And to go off of like what you were saying there, is like, realistically, I've never thought about it like that, but like what you're saying is like kind of like, how do you incentivize this, or how do you do that? Well, it would seem like the insurance companies could say, okay, well, we're not going to pay you any crop damage. Like, we're not going to give you any subsidized crop damage until we're going to pay per deer, like per percentage. So let's say that the whole entire, let's say that so like, let's say that it's $2,500. So that's, $25 a deer, or, whatever the number is, but you need to prove that you're trying to fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. Is like, there needs to be somehow, whether it's pushed back on the farmers, or if it's like almost, I was saying it was more like the state or insurance company, like leasing the land, like paying for the lease for it to be opened type of thing. But yeah, somehow for things to change, like there's got to be money involved, because otherwise people don't want you touching their land or on it. Like, it used to be way more opened up. Like, I know all the old timers talk about it, like, oh, we would be squirrel hunting in this guy's woods or doing whatever, and nobody cared. And now it's like, man, if you take your four-wheeler across that line, there all of a sudden there's gonna be trucks showing up, and people are gonna be real pissed.
Well, I remember being 12, 14 years old on that side of the state in that area, and muzzleloader opener, like driving what seemed like the whole county. Like every single block of woods there was probably 40 guys on the muzzleloader drive, and we drove every farmer's land, and it's
trying
10 square miles.
Try and drive that same property today with the same family, and you're not driving it. Like, there's gonna be some pissed family members that are like, you're not going near my stand during gun season, or or muzzleloader season or whatever. Like, don't be stirring that up pot. So things have just changed. I mean, people took it, like I was saying, like it used to be, it was all about the deer camp and the people getting together, and it was just fun, and then people started getting real serious about the inches. And I know you've talked about it plenty of times in your podcast. So, like, it used to be like, oh, I shot a 6-point or I shot an 8-point, and nobody really counted, or like, and now it's like, oh, it was 137 and 5/8. You're like, well, could have used another year. He'd better be 143 next spring, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that was one thing. Like before the Echo, Josh Tilker, he was in Kansas the same time that we were, and he shot that. He shot a really nice buck out there, so I wanted to watch the video, and I watched the video, and I thought it was really cool when he recovered it. He goes, he was just kind of like in awe. He was real excited, and he's like, I'm gonna go all redneck on you, and he's like 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted. He's like 12 points. He's like, I shot a 12-pointer. He's like, and I just thought that was like super cool, because that's that's the way that I grew up, and what's really funny is, again, like outside of our like little space that we live in, I killed that buck in Kansas, and I sent pictures back to like the people that I work with, and, people that have no idea about hunting or anything like that. And, everybody was like, oh, you got a nice 8-pointer, like that's just how it was. Yep. And I think that's just how it still translates to, a large segment of the population.
Yeah. Everybody outside the bubble.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, are you like from a herd health, from a betterment of the resource, 1 buck, APR, earn a buck?
I think I would eventually be down with 1 buck, but before we get there, it's just the population in general needs to be down. Like you're talking about, you guys went to Kansas, did really well. The bucks are big out there, everybody says. I took my buck yesterday. That was one of my biggest bucks, and it would have fit inside of, I had dinner last night with one of the other guys that I did this lease with. Would have fit inside his Kansas buck from this year, and it was only a 5-point. When you're talking points, like, oh, nice 5-point. This thing was, I'm outside your little screen here. This 5-point was wider than I am, But when you look at the numbers of deer Kansas has, it's like 70,000 deer across the whole state. And when I grew up, there was 90,000 doe tags allowed for my county. So it's just like, we have a huge overpopulation compared to other states. Like, we have the most deer per square mile, the most deer, even though we have the most hunters, we have the most deer per hunter. So I think before we like start narrowing down our buck tags or whatever, like, and maybe that would help, but going to 1 buck tag, maybe we try it and see if it does help. We just need to like whack a bunch of deer in general. So,
well, it's wild that you say that, and like, maybe we did see like some does and things like when we weren't like quote unquote like on stand or like in hunting situations, because I mean I was only in a tree like a couple of times in Kansas. Both times I was in Kansas, but this past trip in Kansas, and it's wild that you say that, because I never, it hadn't even crossed my mind, but like while we were hunting, I saw 3 does,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw 9 bucks.
Yep.
So,
And that's the
like,
thing is like they talk about if the does are overpopulated, the bucks don't have to even move. You know, like they're just gonna find does in their little 20-yard section of the swamp. Like they don't have to go anywhere because there's so many does to be bred. And then we're having issues with, like, I had a trail camera picture in October during bow season of a fawn with spots that was like real young. Um, that was not going to last through winter, and that's from there's too many does, so they're not getting bred when they're supposed to be. So she was bred way late into winter, and it's just something that we have to address and like start whacking back the population just in general. I mean, when you start, I had made a sheet at one point. I'd have to pull it up, but um, comparing all the different states, just because I was kind of like curious about that. And that's where I found out it was like Michigan's the highest population of deer from their estimate at least. So, you know, it's kind of like take that with a grain of salt, but everybody else has their own little juice, and we're above it by quite a bit. Whether, you know, it's as accurate or not, it's at least up there in the top. But all the destination states, you want to go to Iowa, you want to go to Kansas, you want to go to Illinois, way less deer in general. And so because of that, you get more of that rutting action. You get more of those bucks having to cruise to find does, having to like fight off other bucks. You get all that rut action and stuff. And because there's not as many of them fighting over the food and the habitat, they get bigger. So I think that's kind of like what we're stuck in right now is that there's just too many mouths trying to share that one pizza around the plate, you know, around the table. But
how do you like kill off that many deer? Like if they say 100 numbers are going down, everybody wants to kill that big buck. You're out here passing 7 does to try and shoot the neighbor's buck. You know, like how do you? I mean, what's the answer? Like, do you? I mean, it would go over like a fart in church. It would be so terrible. But if they had like a no buck season, like, or if they said, okay, well, we're going to have a rifle season that's only 2 days long. Like we're going to have a rifle weekend and a muzzleloader weekend for bucks, and then the rest of it's just doe season. Like,
yeah, I'm not sure. I know it seems like they're trying different things right now. Like with this extended late antlerless that's like doe only, but you can use basically any weapon and stuff. They're like, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, adding it on the end, like if you look at the app now, we can just like look up harvest numbers for any season, and it was like after the gun season and then muzzleloader season last year was pretty big, but after that it just tapers right off for like actual deer killed because people get into the holidays and all that. So they're like, well, what if we had something after New Year's even? You know, like people could still gather there and shoot whatever, but everybody's scared to shoot a buck that's shedded antlers. So I threw it out there on that. Oh, you've had him on here a couple times, the Whitetail Project, Josh Arbogast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. On his Facebook thing, I was like, what if we had a early archery season for, you know, like some of these states have for velvet bucks or whatever, like, and they're like, no, we don't need a longer season. I was like, well, that's what they're trying to do right now. Anyway, is like they're trying to play with different seasons, but if you did it like something like that, get people excited about it earlier in the year, and then they're starting to fill tags, and if it is a velvet tag, sure, they're going to go out and shoot a velvet buck. And some people are like, oh, well, it's velvet buck, it's in an ag field, that was easy, whatever. Well, okay, but then they filled that tag, and then the rest of the year they have they're going to start filling doe tags earlier, before that gets into the holidays. So I don't know. I mean, they're going to start playing with all sorts of things just to, kind of like they opened up muzzleloader to any rifle. That's not going back until the population goes down, I don't think. So they might be making it even longer. I mean, there's a week in between. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just wild to think, and it's almost like it's almost like it's too far gone. Like we're so scared to make any changes because we don't want to lose any more hunters, and we don't want to upset the ones we got.
We always say we make a change, and people are like, "Oh, the DNR in Michigan sucks so bad. I'm gonna go to Ohio." Well, Ohio just put out their numbers for like out of state people, and only 4,000 people from Michigan hunted Ohio this year.
Well, Ohio just jacked up their prices.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so does every other state, I guess. Screw the, like, to go anywhere, you're gonna be spending more money than the $20 tag it is here.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know what you've spent on out-of-state tags, but like Ohio, I think it used to be. I think when I hunted Ohio, it was like $270 for like a buck and two does or something like that, and then now that same tag is like $400. So it like essentially doubled. Like that second tag or whatever, it became like $200. I think Indiana's still like 200 some. I think Wisconsin's still like 200 some
for your first time too.
Yep. Illinois is 500, Kansas is 600 or 700. I think Iowa's in that same ballpark. You're still talking like elk tag prices, but
yeah. So say the amount of people that went to Ohio this year got cut in half from last year because of the tag. That's still less than 1% of our hunters went to Ohio to hunt. So even if they hunted both Michigan and Ohio, there's not actually that many people going to Ohio to hunt. I mean, 4,000 people is probably the amount of people that hunted Sleepy Hollow State Park right next to me, like, let alone the whole state. So
I don't know. I mean, maybe I think that it's just like we're in a bubble, right? Because like for me, I feel like everybody that I know hunts multiple states.
Yeah.
It's like, what states are you hunting this year? Oh, well, I drew Kansas. I did this. Oh, well, I'm going out west. Like, I'm not going out west this year because I did this or like whatever. And then I guess everybody else that I talk to says, well, I want to, I'm planning on it or whatever. Is always like in the back of your mind, but maybe it's the same thing about the 8-pointer that like everybody just wants to sit in their box blind and shoot their buck and, do whatever. So I don't know. It's just a wild place that we're in right now.
Before podcasts, I don't think anybody really traveled out of state, and now it's like opened up the door to, oh, actually, if I did do this, like how much easier it could be to just take your bow across the state line. It's not like that big of a deal other than the tag's expensive. And
so we did 2 years before we started the podcast. And it was just like becoming like eye opening that it was like not that, I don't want to say like big of a deal, but it wasn't like that impossible, I guess is the, like regular people could do it. Just like the same thing as like regular people can go kill an elk or regular people can go do these things. Like, and I think that's like where, like, that's where I would put like Alaska, like right now. Like Alaska to me is like, that's not regular people stuff. Like New Zealand isn't like regular people stuff, like,
it's like the last frontier.
Yeah.
And it's getting to be, so there's another like trend with all your influencers or whatever is Alaska was becoming big and then it got too big. And so they started rolling back some of their non-resident stuff. And so now people are pushing into Canada because there's too many people applying for all these elk tags and stuff, and they're starting to change and get tight. And so now people are like, well, I'll just go to an outfitter in Canada then, because then it's guaranteed and come home. I know John Dudley every year, he's in September, he's in Canada. He's got mule deer and elk tag and does that before he comes back to the States.
So what podcasts are you listening to like right now that's not Michigan based? Like, so for people who aren't in Michigan, like what's like on your radar?
Right now for non-Michigan, like still whitetail, East Meets West. He's putting out some really good stuff. Bowhunter, and you know them probably through Spartan Forge and all that stuff they got going. But he's doing a really good job with like his videos and stuff too are pretty good quality. And he's got some good guests on there, and the shoot to hunt guys I mentioned, because they're like, if you want to learn anything about rifle hunting and stuff, like they're like very good and tied into that world of the Western rifle shooting, both long range competition and for hunting. And then also for like Western stuff, Six Ranch podcast. He's like a former Army Tank Battalion guy, but he's starting to do more like videos and stuff, because now he's an elk guide, like family ranch hand, grew up on the ranch, and now he guides elk on the ranch and stuff. But now he's like sponsored by SIG and all these different companies, so it's more like rifle stuff, but he's also just kind of like hey, here's a realistic amount of meat you get off an elk, because he's like butchering them all and stuff. And like Cliff Gray, I think. He's really good. He was a Western guide in Colorado, sold his guiding business, and now he has a podcast. And then he still like guides a little bit and like goes on hunts with people. But he's a wealth of information, because he's one of those guys that just like, grew up in a guide service basically out in Colorado, and then been through it all for a few years and running it as his own, and then sold it off. So the business side of it too, listen to him about that stuff. It's pretty interesting. The other whitetail one, it's been like I've been listening to, and it's a little controversial because they have guests on there that are like could be called poachers sometimes, or like were convicted at one point. But the We Are Hunter, or it's like Hunter without the vowels in it or whatever. Those guys, but they're just because they're big, like private land hunting kind of style. And I do a mix of that, like a lot, of the private land type stuff. So I listen to them just to see like what are they doing to their properties and what's going on. And every once in a while I've picked up like the W, kind of the same thing, like took the vowels out for the name. That's maybe what you guys should have done with Rome and just been but the WHTL or whatever, like whitetail without the vowels or whatever. He's been putting out some good guests, some like big names.
And that's the Exodus, right? That's Chad from Exodus, right?
Yeah. So he was on Exodus, and you just had one of the other Exodus guys on, right?
Cameron, yeah.
About cameras and stuff, and he said those cheap mole trees are the way to go, I guess. But I don't know. I've been having issues with one of mine, so.
Well, he was talking more about the app being the good. The app is great, So.
Yeah.
Now, is there anything like new that's popped up recently that where you're like, oh, because that's a hard thing is like you get into, I wish that there was like a thing for podcasts that's like, would be like suggested, like a Pandora for podcasts, where it would be like, if you like this one, try this one,
Yep.
where I don't think they have
Spotify
that.
is trying to do that a little bit. Like, I just listened to, it was Meat Eaters last week, and they're like, they started off and they were all like the biologists and stuff, and like during the hunt they had it on like in the tent, and you could hear the flapping and it was awesome when they, I pick and choose now a lot of my episodes for them. But their last guy was like a Wyatt Earp Western history specialist or something. It was like about the OK Corral. And that one was recommended on Spotify, and it was like, this one has over 100,000+ views or something. I was like, okay, like, yeah, I like history. I'll check it out.
So that's one thing I do not like about some podcasts. In like one of like the biggest podcasts out there, because it's on the Meat Eater Network and all that stuff, is the Bear Grease podcast.
Yeah.
And like I have nothing against the guy. I find it like pretty interesting. Like some of his stuff is interesting, like the historical stuff. And there was one that I listened to that was like really, really good, but I just hate like the overproduced, like the music in the background,
yeah.
and like the very scripted, like how it sounds like it's like one of the murder podcasts, like where the true crime, like some that's produced by NPR, like that's a style that I don't like. So I'd rather be like a fly on the wall. Like I'd really rather listen to a guy in his truck than something that's like that produced,
Yeah. Well, and that's what, so if anybody pays for Spotify, you can listen to the Meat Eater, their books that are out, and it's basically just a long one of those episodes where it's like the history of hunters from this time period. Like I think the first one's with that Clay Newcomb that does that Bear Grease podcast, because he's got that Southern voice or whatever, but he's talking about Daniel Boone. But it's basically like a 6-hour podcast is the audiobook. And I think if you have premium, they're supposed to be free on that. I'd picked them up on Audible and listened to them, and they're pretty good, because there's like one's about the deer hunters, one's about the fur trappers trapping beaver, and then the last one was about the buffalo hunting out there.
Yeah,
so.
I listened to most of them. Like between Kansas and the UP in the last month, like I think I would had like 36 hours like solo in the car. So
yeah,
like I listened to a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to peel back. I've been either reading more books, like those Barry Wenzel books I read.
Yeah, I got to send you that
audiobooks.
I got to send those back to you, and then send you the ones that the Bobby Worthington one.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, because those old school guys, I like listening to them.
So if you end up, I'll tell Matt, and I'll tell anybody else out there. So the newest Bobby Worthington book, I bought it off the Ozio website. I don't know if it's still available, or maybe it's just available at shows or whatever. Because I wanted the bow hunting trophy whitetails, and like it's only available like every so often on eBay for like a few $100s, and it's like I'm not going to spend that money. And I think even in this book, or I read it on, or I listened to him on a podcast, and maybe he said that there's a lot of the same information. But like the first like chapter or two, like was very helpful for me. But it's about traditional target archery and like perfecting a traditional archery shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so boring of a read. And I was reading it when I was doing the 75 hard.
Oh,
and you had to read 10 pages, and it's like the book is like the size of a billboard, and there's like little tiny font, and there was like 1 million words per page, and it took me like an hour to read 10 pages. Like it was like the most boring and dry information known to man. So just keep that in mind when you're starting.
Come back to this at the end.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to learn how to like engage your back muscles and like perfect your release, there's some great information in there, and it really did help me to understand like the mechanics of a good clean release with traditional archery. However, he takes a long time to get there, so just keep that in mind.
Well, that's all. Listen to a lot of old guys. It's like their way of storytelling is at their own pace.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those those Wenzel brothers, Ozio did the video on them or whatever. And then reading through the books, it's like, I mean, they ran a guide service. I don't know if you read through them or not.
I read some of it, yeah.
But they ran a guide service for whitetails, and they were like the highest number of Pope and Young bucks for a guide service like ever or something. I mean, it was just over a 10-year period. They had like 90% of their clients shot a Pope and Young buck. And so not only just them are getting on, you know, good trophy class deer, but getting other people in range and all that. I was like, these guys know what they're talking about. And a lot of time, you know, they're doing it with traditional gear and stuff. So
yeah,
somebody to listen to. So.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on, and it's fun, and it's always fun to talk to somebody that you know, and that, you know, we've hunted in multiple states together now, so
yep.
And it's been fun. So I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on here and just kind of BSing a little bit about, you know, podcasting and the Michigan stuff. So appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, thanks, man.
No problem.
This is the Hunt Stand Podcast. I'm your host, Will Cooper. Each week, we bring you real hunting stories, proven strategies, and dive into the topics hunters care about most. From chasing your first whitetail to planning a western elk hunt, we cover the conversations that matter to every hunter out there. Tune in, subscribe, and join the hunt, only on the Hunt Stand Podcast.
From dawn to dusk and every moment in between, Captain Justin Leake and Meredith McCord have an exciting adventure waiting in the water. Catch Chasing the Sun, Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV. Waypoint TV, your destination for outdoor entertainment.